So the question is about Abhinavagupta. Abhinavagupta is one of the greatest tantric masters in the history of India. He was considered the number one in the 12th century, and he was coming from Kashmiri Shaivism from that direction. Our school is very much in line with the Kashmiri Shaivistic lineage, and we can trace back many of the old teachers in our lineage to Kashmiri Shaivism, to Kashmir, and eventually all the way to Abhinavagupta and those type of gurus, just to give you a background what she means by that. And she says that she read that Abhinavagupta, while having sexual union, in other words, tantric sexuality, could have reached high states of consciousness, enlightenment or something like that through that. And it is true that Abhinavagupta, as far as we know, was indeed sexually very powerful and having this ability. In fact, it is said that he had two lovers who were sisters, and together they were doing these tantric practices and so on. But it's also known that Abhinavagupta reached high levels of consciousness through tantric meditations and other technologies of Tantra. So I'm not sure that he reached first time through sexual union. I think that he reached actually because of working with great gurus in his time that helped him to reach high levels of consciousness through his own practice. And then later on, while making love, he could also access it through the act of lovemaking as well. So yes, the act of lovemaking in Tantra can become a very powerful spiritual practice. It can lead that both the man and the woman could elevate together their level of consciousness through tantric bliss, through tantric orgasms, through all these ecstatic experiences in Tantra, and eventually, and that's one of the beautiful things in Tantra, unlike the ascetic paths, where you sit in your room and do your meditation, and maybe after 30 years you get your enlightenment, and she sits in her cave and meditates, and maybe after 30 years she gets to her enlightenment, or in her monastery or whatever. In Tantra, the man and the woman together can share a lot of love and passion and orgasms and pleasure and ecstasy, and together, while looking into each other's eyes, can reach high levels of consciousness, which would be a very beautiful way to reach enlightenment. Instead of this isolation type of thing, you can actually do it with another human being. So these things indeed exist. Abhinavagupta was famous that he could do it in tantric sexuality, and I hope that gives an answer there. So the question is, can astral projection or astral separation from the physical body happen, even not in regular sleep, but in other day-to-day in situations? And the answer is that it can happen, but then we need to see what situation we're talking about. One example of something that can be close to that is daydreaming. When you sit and listen to a lecture or something, or you're sitting in the bus and just waiting, and the mind starts going taka taka taka, and you kind of find yourself daydreaming, then that could translate to some kind of astral shift or dislodging of the astral separation. The silver string that I've mentioned will always be there. This is like an organ in your body. It never separates ever, unless we're talking about death. Then of course the separation is permanent, but otherwise nothing changes. Whatever happens when you're awake or asleep or in any situation, it will always be there. Otherwise there's only death follows. So that's to answer the subject of the silver string. Other than that, yes, the separation is possible in a variety of situations. Even in meditation this can happen. When a person meditates very deeply, sometimes you can find yourself having an out-of-body experience. I've had it. I know many people that when they meditated, it's not that unique actually, that they meditate, and sometimes in the middle of the meditation they see themselves standing in front of their own body on the floor meditating. It's like, whoa, it's a very funny, weird experience. And there's many stories like that where people can sometimes have an out-of-body experience and they're not sleeping, and it's something else which is happening. Sometimes it can happen even because of mechanical situation, like you go on one of those entertainment parks, you know, this Luna Park, entertainment park, when you go on these roller coasters and so on, because the movement is so fast, and sometimes depends on the whatever game you're playing over there, it can be so intense that there can be a momentary out-of-body experience because it's so boom, you know, it's so wild. There's even some videos you can find on YouTube of people who are going on some of these strong roller coaster things with the camera on them, and you can see that they're having an experience which is out of body for a few seconds. It's not a permanent thing, it's just very brief. So definitely these things can happen also not in sleep. The only difference is that when we sleep, this is much more common, It's almost expected and natural to happen, while in other situations it's a bit outside of most people's comfort zone because we're not used to it. So if somebody next to you, a friend, a lover, or somebody, is having that out-of-body experience while you're there, should you be calm or not? I would suggest in any situation in life it's good to be calm. It won't help if you freak out or anything, unless you feel that he's in distress. If the person is in distress, then maybe you want to try gently to bring him back and help him to stabilize and come back to a more harmonious state. But if the person is just lying down, smiling and having their out-of-body experience, then unless you are too bored and what's the point of me visiting you? You're sitting there floating. I might as well watch Netflix or something like that. Unless you are too bored, then just let him be. There's nothing you need to do. It's actually a good question, but this does not happen in astral projection. It can happen in other situations that are not happening for the average person usually. In certain circumstances, for example, in yoga, advanced yogis have the capacity to have something else which is called more a consciousness transference. That is something that we cannot go into today. It's a very big topic. It's taught mostly in Tibetan yoga, but also in Indian yoga and Tantra. And it's a thing where the yogi can consciously dislocate his consciousness or her consciousness and move it to another body or something like that. It's a very big issue. It has a name in Sanskrit, but I don't want to go into the details of it right now. But in that case, then there is a possibility for some other entity to try and take over, but then there are also security measures that the yogi can take and usually is taking in order to protect their body while they are outside doing whatever they're doing. And then it should not happen. But it is still possible that some of these things can be there. And there are also some more abnormal situations. It's very rare, but it can happen, where a human being can be kind of taken over. But that already moves towards what we call possession, like an entity possessing the human being or something. But possession doesn't mean that the person is vacant. It means that the person's personality and their soul and so on are kind of put to the back seat, so to speak. They are kind of put in a place where the entity or whatever energy is taking over is kind of driving the car, so to speak. They are behind the wheel, and then this entity will do certain things at that time. While you can remember it, sometimes you don't even remember it, but then that entity might take over temporarily. I'll give you a classic example where this may happen, and it happens commonly in the case of a person who is drinking a lot of alcohol. Many people don't even stop to think about it, but when a person gets very hammered, very drunk, sometimes they do things they don't remember, they act in a way which is not characteristic to them, and it's like, who is this person? When you're drunk, you are a different person, because actually you are. There's a different entity takes over, because alcohol makes a person very, very yin, very, very, very receptive, and then control is zero. And then there can be some entities that actually may take advantage of this. That's one of the reasons why alcohol is called what? Why do they call alcohol spirit? Because there are spirits related to various alcoholic beverages, and then it can actually, it is an exchange which is made. You take, not you, somebody takes the alcohol, and then you get the buzz and the nice feeling and so on, and the entity takes you for a ride, because the entity in its subtle form cannot fulfill its desires because it doesn't have a physical body. But then if it takes possession of somebody's body even for an hour, 2 hours, in that time you can have irresponsible sex, you can eat all kinds of foods, you can enjoy because you have the organ to feel it for temporarily, and then you had your fun, and then when you wake up from your alcoholic stupor, it's like, wow, that was a crazy night, and then you need to deal with the consequences. They screwed up your vehicle, and maybe you need to take some antibiotics afterwards or something like that, because the entity was doing all kinds of stupid things with your body. But this is kind of a classic thing, and there's many. This is a type of possession in a way, and it can happen in other situations. Of course, in yoga, in Tantra, this is unacceptable. The yogis will never, ever create situations where they can be in such lack of control, where they cannot be responsible, or maybe something will take over. On the contrary, the yogis go the other way, and they develop perfect control in order to be able to control the energy, to develop spiritually and so on. And if certain entities try with a yogi, they would never even try. Like a story coming from, I think it was from Nepal or Tibet, about a great yogi that lived in that area. And apparently in that area there were two demons that were playing tricks on people, because they're demons and they like to have fun. So they were doing a trick where one of the demons would turn himself into a cake, a very delicious cake, and then the other demon will take the cake, and when somebody passes by says, "Would you like some cake?" And most people say, "Wow, that looks good," and then they will eat the cake. And then the demon would call the other one, let's call him Succubus. It's not that, but just as a name. Succubus, come out. And then the other demon bursts out, the person explodes, and they laugh their ass off. That was a good joke, and they killed someone, and it was a lot of fun for them, because they're demons and that's how they do things. And the story goes that at some point, that yogi that was very powerful, he had a very strong fire, very strong Manipura, he was passing by, and they played this trick on him. "Would you like the cake?" And he said, "Sure, why not?" And he ate the cake. And then the demon says, "Succubus, come out." And the yogi looks at him and just burps. He just digests everything, you know. You can't play these games on a yogi. Try to possess him or something, it's not really possible. So that's the example there. So the question is about lucid dreaming, about out-of-body experience, and when you have sometimes this experience, there's a feeling of increased heart rate and some kind of stress, which doesn't help you to stay longer in the experience. You kind of snap back into your body and you have to stop. This is a common phenomenon, and usually because the person is not used to this type of experience and they have not meditated much or done spiritual practice, then the ego gets very stressed up because there's a separation and it feels like death, and the ego is not suicidal, so it's like, oh my God, something's wrong, and it pushes you back to feel normal again in your body. But when you meditate more regularly, then you get more comfortable with the body and the mind not being necessarily constantly with body awareness. The mind can float, can be more expansive, can go much deeper, and as a result of that, the body learns how to stay quiet, almost numb, without feeling stressed about it, because you're in a very deep state of meditation. As you do more and more this kind of work and develop your third eye more, then at some point when you try to do what you just described in lucid dreaming and out of body and all that, then the experience can happen and you feel more comfortable. You're saying, it's okay, it's not the end of the world, it's just temporary, you control it better, and you can do what you want to do, experience your out-of-body thing, and come back to the physical body, and it becomes much more harmonious. Practice makes perfect, and spiritual practice really brings it all the way. You know, these questions always open the doors to so much, but I'll try and say briefly. So what does Tantra or Yoga say about cancer? There are a variety of diseases. We can call them the Neolithical diseases. These are diseases that are more common in the last 100 years, and especially in the last few decades, 50 years and so on, they increase more and more and more. This is one of them. Also diabetes, and there's autoimmune diseases, and there's all kinds of these diseases that were not known actually at all. I remember that when I was young, about 50 years ago, I don't remember anybody talking about autoimmune diseases. I don't even know this term. I only heard it in the last 20 years more, something like that, but it was not very common. Same goes to other diseases that today they have very nice names, like Crohn's disease and, I don't know, IBS, and people would say I have a stomachache, that's it. It wasn't so complicated. But as we are becoming more and more dependent on technology, and we live further and further away from nature, and we are separated from nature in so many ways, it would take me an hour just talking about it. Not only that we are separated from nature, the fact that we live in cities, but we also have a lot of habits that we develop that are extremely damaging for our health. One of them, for example, is the fact that we are very much living a life which is artificial. Electricity, for example. The invention of electricity sounds like great progression, great progress, but actually from the time electricity was brought forth in 1874, when Tesla and Edison brought it in upstate New York, there was some big fanfare and they started presenting electricity, and the DC and AC electricity was developed and so on. From that point, they electrified the planet. Read a book on this, which is fascinating. It's called The Hidden Rainbow, I think it's called. I can link it to people later on if you want to look into it. And you realize that as this was developed more and more and electricity started spreading around the world, more and more diseases started coming that nobody ever heard of. For example, I personally know a doctor that his teacher, a doctor that was teaching him, who was very old, so we're talking, this doctor I'm talking about is in his 60s now, and the one who taught him died long time ago, and when he was teaching him back in the day, that doctor was 8 years old, the teacher doctor. And he told him when we were young, that teacher doctor was saying, when I discovered that one of my patients was having cancer, it was so rare, I would call all the other doctors and tell them, look, this is a very rare disease and you need to recognize it because you won't see it again probably. And now we live in a situation when 1 person out of 3 or out of 4 is having cancer. Some countries, 1 person out of 2. It's so common these days. So what happened in the last 100 years? You have the Industrial Revolution, the Green Revolution in the 1940s with agriculture. You have, of course, the increase in EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, and many other things that happen. Even the fact that we have light that we didn't have before the invention of electricity, you would have to turn on gas light or just candles in order to have light. If you ever try to stay awake with just candles, then you know that when it's 8 o'clock, in most countries 8 or maximum 9, it gets very dark, some countries earlier, and if you put candles on, after an hour, 2 hours, you're drowsing off, you're falling asleep. There's no TV because it's electricity, there's no radio, there's only a book to read under the candlelight or something like that. Maybe put the fire on and have a chat, sing along or something, and everybody gets to sleep pretty quickly. You sleep when it gets dark, you wake up when the sun comes up. That's normal. Not anymore. With electricity being such an essential part of our life, you can stay up as long as you want. You watch TV, you become addicted to these things, you wake up in different hours. Basically, the circadian rhythm of the human being is disrupted massively. On top of that, we've got the blue light, which has been invented ever since the fluorescent light and the neon light and so on. This blue light is actually bringing a frequency of light which is very foreign to the human being. This is not normal light. This is blue light, which is like a foreign sun. The sun, as you know it in the sky, actually brings a lot of frequency of light, not just white light or blue light. There's yellow, there's green, there's all kinds of lights in the sun, which is actually much more nourishing for the body. When you isolate the light only to blue light, it is very toxic to the human being, and it can generate cancer, and it can generate a lot of diseases. And I didn't even mention 10% of all the problems that we have today that cause all these diseases. This is a whole lecture in itself. Then, of course, people get sick very quickly, and they develop all kinds of problems. I've also mentioned the subject of prana in the lecture about the 5 bodies. And when the vitality of the body is decreasing, the tissues will start getting confused, and we can find also cancer cases are common to develop then. And then if the person is having too much telluric energy, not enough cosmic energy, that also can cause some forms of cancer. And the more you go into this, you'll realize that eventually the surprising thing is that it's not a disease. Pharmaceutical companies would want to tell you it's a disease because once you define it as a disease, you can patent a cure and nothing else. If you claim that anything else might help in that situation, you're a quack and you should be in jail or something like that. But actually there are those who claim, like Andreas Moritz and a few others, that this is actually toxicity in the body. When the body is super toxic and very acidic, then the tissues start having problems. They ferment, they start having these phenomena that we call cancer. And that's why by dealing with it through alkalizing the body and purifying and doing a lot of detox and so on, you can actually bring a lot of benefits and avoid a lot of these things. But it's an uphill battle because you think you've done one cleanse, okay, I'm free now. But it doesn't end because you're continuously bombarded with so many impurities these days. I didn't even touch a little bit of it because that would be a whole lecture in itself. But we are bombarded continuously. Unless you live in the mountains somewhere very far away with no electricity, no internet, no nothing, and you live in nature continuously, then maybe you can maintain your purity without detoxing for much longer time. But for most of us, detoxing has to be constant. Most people don't do much detox at all. In fact, many people live lifestyle which is damaging. They're smoking, they're drinking, they're eating junk food or fast food. You know what they call it, fast food? It brings you to the grave faster, right? So you've got fast food, you've got all kinds of chemicals and artificial coloring and heavy metals, and the list goes on. There's much more than that. And people just live their life like that. They, oh, don't tell me about all this cleansing. I want to enjoy my life. So what, I can't drink my alcohol? I don't want to hear about your yoga, because it's a lot easier to do this and hope for the best. You know, like the ostrich, this big bird, when the problem comes, you put the head in the sand and hope for the best. Well, the hope doesn't seem to work here. A lot of people are dying. So that is the viewpoint here. And again, it's such a big topic. Not only a lecture, but a full workshop can be done just on healing. And in fact, I might do a workshop called Tantric Healing, and we'll go into some incredible teachings on how this can be done. But we'll see. I don't know if it'll be done, at least not soon, but we'll hope for the best. Okay, I think it's time for us to conclude. Thank you all very much for joining this satsang, and we'll see you again next time. Have a good evening.